Part 115. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1141. Chapter 1141. The Little Fox in the Snow. While shouting, he looked around anxiously, trying to find tools that could be used. However, there was nothing nearby. She didn't have time to think about it, and immediately took off her long coat, held one end of it, and threw the other end towards Pei Jingyu. "Hurry up and grab it. I'll drag you up." Pei Jingyu was immersed in the cold lake water. She couldn't swim, so she choked on her water several times in a row. The feeling of suffocation came over her, filling her heart with fear. When she was in despair, she suddenly saw Xiaoling's coat thrown over her. It was as if she had grabbed the last straw and couldn't care less. She grabbed Xiaoling too hard and pulled Xiaoling's body hard. Suddenly Xiaoling couldn't bear the strength and slipped half a step into the lake, with part of her calf immersed in the lake water. Xiaoling's expression changed due to the biting coldness. She gasped before she tensed up. She gritted her teeth and encouraged herself and Pei Jingyu, "Hold on." Pei Jingyu's down jacket was soaked in water and became extremely heavy. Xiaoling was a girl after all, and she didn't have much strength. She was about to be dragged into the water by Pei Jingyu step by step. But she refused to let go no matter what, and desperately threw her body backwards, tugging on the life-saving clothes like a tug of war. Her face turned pale. Pei Jingyu felt that her body was getting colder and colder. The sun was dazzling on the water, but she felt the breath of death close at hand. Her consciousness drifted a little, and her mind went blank. Only Xiaoling's gritted teeth face remained in front of her. Even though she accompanied her step by step into despair, she never let go. She was a little confused. Isn't Xiaoling her enemy? He was just a despicable actor. How could he risk his life to save her? It's so weird. His mind gradually blurred, and he didn't know how long it had been. It seemed like only a short second, and it seemed like an eternity. She saw several staff members rushing toward them in fright, hugging Xiaoling, taking the rope twisted from her coat, and pulling her ashore with the combined strength of several people. Xiaoling fainted in the arms of the staff. Pei Jingyu was in a daze and was carried to the guest room in the resort by the staff. A large group of doctors and nurses gathered around her to examine her, give her an intravenous drip, prescribe a lot of medicine, and make soup. She was at their mercy mechanically and numbly. No matter what they asked her, there was no response. What came back over and over again in her mind was the figure of Xiaoling who refused to let go even to the death, and the words "hold on" with all her strength. The soup in his hand was suddenly knocked to the ground. She looked up blankly and saw Pei Xian's furious face. She had never seen her eldest cousin, who had always kept his mood and anger out of control, so out of control. It took a lot of effort for her to hear clearly what Pei Xian was asking. "What the is going on with you? It was Pei Zhenyuan who sent you here, the one who assassinated Xiaoling." Pei Jingyu shook her head, then seemed to come to her senses and asked, "How is she? If something happens to her and the child in her belly, I will never let you go." Pei Xian threatened her coldly, turned around and strode out the door. "Show me this woman." "She doesn't have it for me. You are not allowed to leave the room." The staff around him responded solemnly, bowing their heads and seeing him off. Pei Jingyu was so shocked that she couldn't speak. What? Her and her kids? When did Xiaoling become pregnant? No wonder when my uncle mentioned Xiaoling a few days ago, his expression was a little gloomier than usual. If the child in Xiaoling's belly is born, it will be Pei Xian's first child. Illegitimate child. Pei Jingyu took a breath and didn't dare to think about it anymore. However, strangely, she was vaguely worried about Xiaoling. Could it be that she lost her mind because someone saved her? But there was a little voice in Pei Jingyu's heart that said that a girl who could risk her life to save an enemy with whom she had always had a problem must not be a bad person. In just a few hours, she suddenly felt that she no longer recognized Xiaoling. With her worries in mind, she spent a day quietly in her room. The next day, her body was fine and she acted as usual. When she heard that Xiaoling had woken up from a coma, she asked Pei Xian for permission to visit Xiaoling. Pei Xian was not sure. He didn't want anything to happen to Xiaoling. Who knew what Pei Jingyu's purpose was? Xiaoling, on the other hand, took the initiative to ask Pei Jingyu after waking up, has she been rescued? Pei Xian looked at her gloomily, she survived, how about you? Have you ever thought about what would happen if she dragged her down? Even if we don't drown, our children won't be able to survive such cold water. Xiaoling came to her senses in a daze and smiled to herself, how could you expect so much when you save people? She looked up at him again and said, isn't Pei Jingyu your sister? Can't you bear to see her die? Pei Xian leaned over and reached out to caress her face carefully. Against the warm firelight of the fireplace, she looked so beautiful, as delicate as a flower that didn't understand the world. After a long time, he slowly said, anyone can save her, including myself, but you can't. She is the most precious treasure in the world and is irreplaceable. Xiaoling smiled again, a little gentle and a little sad, Pei Xian, should I be happy or sad? She lowered her head and gently touched her belly, where a pitiable little life was gestating. Would you rather die in my place than give me a status? The hand that was stroking her cheek withdrew, and Pei Xian said, forget that status, you will be much happier. The tall figure of the man left step by step, disappearing into the snowy light of the courtyard. Xiaoling curled up on the recliner and looked at the direction in which he disappeared, the look in her eyes dimmed a little bit. After experiencing this accident, her body, which had only been well for a long time, became fragile again. The medical staff were so busy every day that they wanted to treat her as a porcelain doll, lest anything go wrong. She let them do what they wanted, thinking that she might not be able to have a good time during the spring festival this year. It will soon be New Year's Eve, and there are scattered snow falling in the courtyard. Xiaoling was sitting in the rocking chair in the corridor, holding an exquisite heater in her hand and looking at the scenery. She was wrapped in a thick white fox fur coat, and a small face as big as a palm was exposed under the soft and dense plush. It looks like a cute little fox. Pei Jingyu got Pei Xian's release order and came to see her. When he stood at the door and saw her silhouette like this, he suddenly felt that she didn't seem that annoying after all. Xiaoling, who was sitting on the rocking chair, didn't know what she was thinking. Her palm-sized face kept looking at the snow in the courtyard, looking very dull and stupid. After a long while, I realized that there was someone else in the room. He looked at Pei Jingyu with some vigilance and surprise, why are you still in Zakui Lake? Haven't you gone back to Pei's house for the new year? End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1142. Chapter 1142 Pei Jingyu's Apology. Pei Jingyu gritted her teeth and sneered, I really want to go home to celebrate the new year, but my cousin is still obsessed and refuses to go back. If I can't complete my mission, why should I rush back and punish the family? Xiaoling must have been soaked in water recently and was a little pregnant. After looking at her for a long time, she finally understood the meaning of her words. She simply said oh and turned her head to continue looking at the snow scene. Pei Jingyu was surprised. She originally thought she was going to quarrel again. Raising her chin arrogantly, she stepped forward and handed something to Xiaoling, take it. Xiaoling saw an exquisite necklace in her hand, with a piece of gleaming tourmaline attached to a thin platinum chain. The tourmaline was in excellent condition, and it was definitely not ordinary at first glance. It reflected the faint light of snow in the courtyard and made it look faint. Bright. She admired secretly in her heart, raised her head, and looked at Pei Jingyu in confusion, why are you giving me this? Pei Jingyu said arrogantly, this is a treasure. I managed to grab it from the auction. It can be used as an amulet. Since you saved me, I will give it to you a pair of. Why don't you come and thank me? Yeah expression. Xiaoling was speechless and asked her, are you a Leo? Yes, how do you know? Only Leo people are so arrogant. Xiaoling handed the tourmaline necklace back to her and said, I don't want it. Her little face was buried in the snow fox fur, looking a little childish. Pei Jingyu was stunned and stared at her. How dare you refuse? Xiaoling also stared at her. What's wrong? I don't lack necklaces. The situation was urgent at that time. It was just my instinct to save you. If it were any cat or dog, I would have jumped into the water. However, if you give me time to think about it, when I think about it, maybe I won't risk my life to save you. You, Pei Jing spoke softly, her chest heaving and she was speechless. Xiaoling didn't care whether she was angry or not, and said, I can't tell. I always thought you were stingy, but I didn't expect you to be so generous. You just gave away the priceless tourmaline. Pei Jing said in a humming tone, if you don't want it, forget it. There are many people who want it but can't. She grabbed the tourmaline necklace and turned around to walk out. Xiaoling became anxious when she saw it. Hey, wait. Pei Jingyu still raised her chin. What are you doing? Xiaoling, is this your attitude towards your savior? You haven't said thank you yet. Pei Jingyu gritted her teeth. Don't you want to accept the necklace? I won't accept the necklace, I just want to hear you say thank you. Xiaoling smiled a little hatefully, which made Pei Jing's teeth itch with hatred, and she couldn't help but think about whether to ridicule her severely. However, he finally endured it and said, thank you. Xiaoling blinked. She originally said it as a joke. She expected that Miss Pei would not be able to say thank you to her with her high energy, but she did not expect that the impossible would actually happen. She looked at Pei Jingyu like a monster and forgot to react. Pei Jingyu looked at her with disgust. Are you stupid? Are you too flattered and grateful? Only then did Xiaoling come back to her senses and reached out her hand not to be outdone. Bring it here. What? That tourmaline necklace, didn't you say you wanted to give it to me? Your apology must be sincere. Don't you want it? Pei Jingyu narrowed her eyes dangerously. The Pei family are all good-looking, with a kind of aloof and domineering beauty. Pei Jingyu's narrowed eyes are very similar to Pei Xian's when he is angry, which makes people shudder. However, who is Xiaoling? Those who have grown up with Pei Xian have seen knives more terrifying than this, and they still care about a mere Pei Jingyu? She looked at Pei Jingyu and smiled. I want it again now. Why are you so stingy? You want to take back something you gave away, but you are still the daughter of the Pei family. Pei Jingyu thought, why didn't she drag the stinky girl into the water and die together when she fell into the water? She endured it again and again, and arrogantly threw the tourmaline necklace in her hand to Xiaoling again, with a look of disgust on her face. Take it, this is something with a price but no market. I'm sorry you, a person with no sense, can't even buy it with money. Keep it at the bottom of the box, and use it as a dowry when you get married, so that your husband's parents will look good. The speaker was unintentional, but the listener was intentional. Xiaoling's originally bright expression dimmed. Seeing that she remained silent, Pei Jingyu suddenly realized that she had made a mistake. This stinky girl was still pregnant with her eldest cousin's child. How could she have the chance to marry anyone in her life? Pei Jingyu didn't want to care about her, but looked at her pitiful look and couldn't help but ignore her. Don't be so downcast. How many people want to spoil my first cousin's child and he still can't get pregnant? What happened to the illegitimate child? There are still people fighting for it. If you come here to flatter me, your life will be thousands of times better than that of ordinary people. Do you know that you will have enough food and clothing in your life? Xiaoling lowered her head and looked dully at the radiant tourmaline in her hand. The priceless stone was turned over and over in her hand, but it was nothing more than a dispensable toy. I didn't follow him for food and clothing, she said. Pei Jingyu sneered, is true love really invincible? Xiaoling bit her lip gently and stopped talking. Pei Jingyu looked at her carefully, her expression gradually turned into disbelief, and said, really? We all always thought that you followed him just for fame and fortune, even if you only wanted fame and fortune? True love? Falling in love with him like this, the leader of a wealthy family, has no other ending than sadness. Xiaoling whispered, I can't help it. Love is all in love, a sincere heart is like water, how can it be taken back? If he doesn't want it, he can only be trampled on the ground and crushed. There is no way back for the arrow that has been fired. Pei Jingyu found that she actually sympathized with her. It was really funny. She actually sympathized with someone she had hated since she was a child. After thinking for a while, he said bluntly, don't be sad. Xiaoling took a deep breath, not wanting her to see her decadent look, and forced a smile, I'm not sad. Are you hungry? I'll treat you to something to avoid others saying I don't know how to entertain guests. Road. Pei Jingyu glanced at her sideways with a pair of beautiful almond eyes, come on, why didn't the cousin pay for you? I was forced to give birth to a child for him, so what's wrong with me spending some money on him? Xiaoling turned her grief and anger into motivation, and smiled so hard that she gritted her teeth, it's better for him to live in poverty. Just tell him whether he wants to eat or not. Eat? Why don't you eat? Pei Jingyu also wanted to eat up that beast Pei Xian. In the cold weather, her grandfather forced her to come to this wilderness to find him, but he still refused to go back with her. How do you ask her to do business during the Chinese New Year? Pei Jingyu can foresee how sad the days ahead will be. Eat? He must be poor. The two girls shared the same hatred, walked through the elegantly decorated courtyard and corridor, and went to have dinner together. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1143. Chapter 1143 New Year's Eve, A World of Two. Friendship is a very delicate thing. The two girls had a meal together, complained about Pei Zhenyuan and Pei Xian, and drank tea instead of wine. They actually felt a sense of sympathy for each other. Pei Jingyu held her chin up and looked at Xiaoling and smiled, I have always hated you. I think you are from a humble background. Why should you be the eldest daughter of my Pei family? But you actually saved me this time. If the person standing by the water, if it were Jingshan and the others, they might not be willing to risk their lives. I was wrong, you are really noble. Xiaoling raised her head arrogantly, of course. I've always been the best. Pei Jingyu rarely refuted, but just looked at her, you were still pregnant, didn't you think that if you were dragged into the water by me at that time, you would not be able to keep the child? Xiaoling's expression darkened, didn't Pei Zhenyuan tell you that I once asked him for help and wanted to have an abortion? It was not me who was looking forward to the birth of this child, but Pei Xian. I don't want him to become an illegitimate child. Pei Jingyu didn't expect her to think like this. After a long while, she sighed, it's such an injustice. If I had known today, why did I do it in the first place? In fact, waiting for the child to be born would be more troublesome. Car accidents, poisoning, diseases, you can have anything. Taking the life of a child makes it difficult for people to guard against it. Pei Zhenyuan will not let this child go. She felt pity for the girl in front of her and stayed with her for a long time. Pei Xian and Pei Xian all refused to go back to their clan to celebrate the new year. Pei Jingyu was afraid of going back alone and getting scolded by her grandfather, so she stayed here and refused to leave. She was getting along well with Xiaoling these days, so Pei Xian just let her go. New Year's Eve. A staff member came to inform, Miss Pei, Miss Xia, Mr. Pei has ordered people to set up a dinner in the banquet hall, and is waiting for you two to go and have dinner. Pei Jingyu stood up and gave Xiaoling a hand. Slow down, be careful of the baby in your belly. Xiaoling followed her slowly to the banquet hall and said, why are you so concerned about my baby? If it is aborted, shouldn't your Pei family be very happy? Pei Jingyu glanced at her sideways, you saved my life, of course I will give you back my life and help you protect the baby. We, rich young ladies, are destined to marry someone with a foreign surname in the future. How can we care about our natal family, so many things? You can fight with your cousin as much as you like. I will definitely repay you for saving my life. Xiaoling was silent. When she was about to reach the door of the restaurant, she suddenly whispered with some self-deprecation, I used to be too stupid, naive, and wishful thinking. He never thought about treating me as his wife. If the child can be aborted, leave him. Maybe everyone around me will be happier. Pei Jingyu glanced at her in surprise, I wish you had understood this 2 years earlier. Now, it's too late to say anything, everyone is trapped in the situation and cannot extricate themselves. The door to the banquet hall is right in front of you. From a distance, you can see a tall figure sitting inside, wearing a finely sewn haute couture suit, with a majestic face that has always been cold and unsmiling. The banquet hall was spacious, but it was filled with a sense of oppression because of his presence, making people feel uncomfortable even breathing. Pei Jingyu helped Xiaoling stop at the door and said, my cousin can't get anything he wants. Just accept your fate. At least he will pamper you. Xiaoling could only smile bitterly. Walking to the mahogany dining table covered with white napkins, the waiter opened the cushioned chair on Pei Xian's right for Xiaoling and helped her sit down. Pei Xian prepared the dishes for her with his own hands and said in a warm voice, let's see if this piece of roasted venison is delicious. I specially invited a famous chef. This is his specialty. Xiaoling hated him in her heart and didn't want to eat it at first, but due to the presence of Pei Jingyu, she didn't want to cause too much trouble, so she reluctantly took a bite. The venison melts in your mouth and is as tender as a cloud in the sky. It has a sweet aftertaste and is worthy of the craftsmanship of a famous chef. Before I knew it, I had finished one piece. Pei Xian looked at her tenderly, do you want more? Pei Jingyu was jealous when she saw their show of affection, and said coquettishly, brother, I want it too. Pei Xian said to the waiter on the side, cut the venison for Miss Pei. Pei Jing said, well, I have long known that my eldest cousin has been extremely partial since he adopted Xiaoling more than 10 years ago. By the way, her cousin has long since become dust that is not worth mentioning. Only then did Pei Jingyu feel a little more conscious about being a light bulb, and she immersed herself in eating. The New Year's Eve dinner was very sumptuous, everyone was very full, and the atmosphere was rarely harmonious. After finishing the meal, Pei Jingyu looked at her cousin's eyes and did not stay to make light bulbs. She just found an excuse and left. Pei Xian said to Xiaoling, I'll take you to watch the fireworks. Xiaoling said, I'm a little sleepy. Pei Xian nodded, then I'll help you take a bath and then go to bed. Xiaoling, let's go watch the fireworks. Pei Xian smiled, took her hand, and walked out along the long corridor. Outside the corridor is the boundless Sakuai Lake. The night is beautiful, with stars shining on the blue lake. In the slightly cold wind, there is a faint sound of waves lapping the shore. Xiaoling's delicate jade-like hands curled up docilely in his big hands, which for a moment gave him the illusion that he had gone back to the past, before any harm had happened. The two walked side by side, so close that they could hear their breathing. Xiaoling was also in a daze. How many years had they not spent New Year's Eve together like this? Too long. It was so long ago that even she couldn't remember it clearly. She said, Pei Xian. Pei Xian stopped and lowered his head to look at her tenderly, huh, As soon as he finished speaking, the first cluster of fireworks suddenly bloomed in the distant night sky behind him. They were colorful and brilliant, reflecting his handsomeness. His profile looks like a descending to earth, dreamlike and unreal. She just looked at him blankly, forgetting what she wanted to say. Peizian turned his head to watch the fireworks, then turned back to her and smiled apologetically. It shouldn't have been set off at this time according to the original itinerary. After they arrived at the waterside pavilion by the lake and sat down, the staff should have given them warm tea and snacks. I asked him for permission before setting off the fireworks, but I don't know what went wrong. Xiaoling finally came back to her senses and shook her head. It doesn't matter. I was surprised to realize that I had stared at him for a long time, and then hurriedly lowered my head. Peizian took off his suit jacket and put it on a wooden bench sheltered from the wind in the corridor, and said to her, "Come sit here and watch it here." It was still a long way to the waterside pavilion, and he was afraid it would be too late. Xiaoling looked at the coat and then at him wearing only a shirt and vest. "You will catch a cold." He lowered his head and kissed her. "I'll ask someone to get clothes." He held her hand and made her sit down. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1144. Chapter 1144. Like a jewel. Xiaoling knew she couldn't defeat him, so she stopped insisting and obeyed his arrangements obediently. Peizian was afraid that she would be cold, so he put his arms around her shoulders, pulled her into his arms, and used his body temperature to cover her from the coldness around her. The fireworks started again, and he motioned her to look up. "Your favorite iris. There is also the rose that he thinks best matches her." Countless fireworks bloom and disappear in the night sky, like a gorgeous feast, which makes people fascinated. Xiaoling murmured, "So beautiful. Girls always have a natural yearning for beauty." She stretched out her hands high, as if to catch the fireworks in mid-air, watching the flickering light pointing at them. Time changed, and he suddenly said, "I really hope that we can have this day every year, and we can have this day every year." As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I consciously made a mistake. How long can they be together? When he gets married and has children, he will spend New Year's Eve with another woman watching the fireworks, and will soon forget about her. What will she and her children do then? Thinking about this, his expression darkened. Peizian didn't notice her thoughts and just said, "If you like it, I will watch it with you every year." Xiaoling smiled slightly and said, "I'm tired. Let's go back." "You don't believe me?" Peizian turned her delicate little face and asked. Xiaoling said calmly, "Do you believe it or not? Do we still have a future?" He suddenly lowered his head and gave her a long kiss. Xiaoling was startled and was about to push him away, but found that her body was tightly imprisoned by him and she couldn't push him away no matter what. Fireworks bloomed behind the two of them, making the entire Zaqi lake look like a dream. Xiaoling was breathless from his kiss. At some point he finally let go of her and said in a hoarse voice, "I can't let you go." She felt sad and wanted to cry. "What are you reluctant to part with?" Peizian caressed her lips as delicate as rose petals, and said softly, "How about we have more babies? Girls are like you, boys are like me." "No, don't be like me." He wants to give happiness to the people he loves. Her body shook, and tears fell without warning. It turned out that he knew that she was unhappy. "Why," she cried, "why are you doing this to me? I hate you, I hate you." Peizian said, "I love you." He never took the initiative to tell her that he loved her, not even when they were most passionately entangled in the bed. But now, on New Year's Eve in Zaqi Lake, under the grand rain of fireworks, he said that he loved her. Xiaoling's tears flowed more fiercely. "Peizian, don't lie to me. You will only fall in love with your wife in the future, and we will grow old together. After 100 years, you will be buried together, but what about me? A lonely person, you can bury it anywhere in the wilderness and no one will care. Pei Zion stared into her eyes. Although I can't give you a wedding, I promise that after death, we will be buried together, just the two of us, and we will not be separated even if we turn into ashes. Xiaoling shook her head. How is that possible? He raised a hand and said, I, Pei Zion, swear to God that I will be buried with Xiaoling after my death. If I can't do that, I will be crushed to pieces and spread to ashes, and I will die without a burial place. She immediately covered his mouth. You're crazy. He looked at her tenderly. You are the only woman in my heart, but I also have the entire family and responsibilities. Marriage is unavoidable, Xiaoling, it is just a few decades of status. I promise to grow long with you in 100 years for a long time, we will never be separated. He never said any sweet words, this is already the most beautiful love word. Xiaoling felt that she was really crazy, and she couldn't help but want to believe it. Haven't you been hurt enough by him? She was tangled in her heart and hesitated a lot. She shook her head and said, liar, I don't believe you anymore. Before she finished speaking, her lips were suddenly blocked by someone, and his long kiss was a little domineering. There are bright fireworks all over the place. Xiaoling's body became weak and she collapsed in his arms. She felt that she was really worthless and her whole heart was trembling. She looked at him with tears in her eyes full of grievances and accusations, and she was speechless. Pei Zion stroked her face carefully and asked softly, do you want to be buried with me? She wanted to say no, but her body seemed to be out of control and she nodded involuntarily. He smiled lowly, seemingly satisfied, and kissed her again. She closed her eyes to accept his kiss and extremely gentle caress, thinking desperately, forget it, let's just do it, whether you are happy or not is a matter of time, so just live it for a long time. Wait until he actually has a wife in the future. Who knows what the future will look like? Maybe before that day comes, a meteorite will fall from the sky and destroy the whole world. She felt funny about her thoughts, but this was already the best ending. Little by little, she let go of her grudge against him, and concentrated on raising the baby, looking forward to the birth of the child. The little guy can already move. He kicks and hits her belly from time to time. He looks very energetic. She learned health care from the family doctor brought by Pei Zion and did some simple exercises, hoping that her child would be healthy. He was also thinking about naming the child and asked Pei Zion, what should I call it? Pei Zion said warmly, the girl is called Beizhu. Xiaoling frowned unhappily, Beizhu? It's really unpleasant. Like a pearl, like a jewel, like a necklace, what's wrong with that? She is our treasure. Xiaoling asked, then why isn't it called Yingluo? It also means beautiful jade, and it sounds much better. Pei Zion was silent for a moment. For some reason, the name Yingluo always made him feel conflicted. It seems that in a distant unknown time and space, there is also a baby girl named Yingluo. However, it was not his child. Let's call it Beizhu, he decided. Who dares to say that my daughter's name is unpleasant? Tyrant Xiaoling muttered in a low voice, and then asked him, what if I give birth to a son? Son. The faint smile between Pei Zion's brows disappeared imperceptibly. Before he could answer, Pei Jingyu's voice came from the other end of the corridor, you two know how to hide here, Wei. Do you know that your family is in turmoil? Cousin, the whole clan is waiting for you to bring them to sacrifice Ziyu. Today is the third year of junior high school and I still don't go back. Grandpa is so angry that he is jumping around and smashing things at home. Pei Zion took the opportunity to change the topic, Xiaoling, get ready. We will set off back to the city in the afternoon. Since Xiaoling found out that the old man Pei Zhenyuan had ulterior motives and tried to sterilize her, she felt even worse about the entire Pei family. She said, you and Jingyu went back to worship their ancestors. Why did you take me with you? I want to send you to a safe place. I'm not worried about you being here alone. Pei Zion lowered his head and kissed her. Be good, when I come back from the ancestor worship, I will take you to the hospital for a checkup. Then you can know the gender of the child. It's been more than 4 months. Xiaoling then smiled brightly, okay. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1145. Chapter 1145 Pregnancy Exposed. A few days after returning to the city, Pei Zion kept his promise and took Xiaoling to the hospital for a pregnancy test. In the examination room, the doctor smiled and said to them, "Congratulations to both of you, it's a boy." Xiaoling looked at the little guy curled up in a ball on the screen of the instrument, and a peaceful smile appeared on her face. He was so cute. After thanking the doctor, she took Pei Zion's hand and walked along the corridor, raised her face and asked him, "Last time you didn't tell me what the boy's name should be." Pei Zion's expression was a little dull. "What do you want to be called?" Xiaoling stretched out her hand and gently touched her belly, and said with a smile, "I haven't thought about it yet. I hope that he will be healthy and handsome in the future, have a harmonious family and a successful career." "Is it too greedy?" Pei Zion said, "You can call him anything you want." Xiaoling leaned lightly into his arms and said, "Zi Hung, thank you for letting me keep him. I once thought the best way was to kill him, but I just saw his appearance on the screen. At this time, I am really grateful to God for giving me such a cute little baby." Pei Zion said politely and looked up out of the window. Outside the window, winter has not passed yet, and clusters of winter sweet flowers are in full swing. He suddenly said to Xiaoling, "How about I go get this winter sweet for you? To celebrate." She looked at him with a smile and admiration. "What, do you need to celebrate the birth of a son?" Pei Zion said, "I like both my son and my daughter. This is to celebrate that you are about to become a mother." Xiaoling laughed again, "Really or not?" He pointed out the window and said, "Then I want the one with the biggest and reddest flower." Out the window, a flaming winter sweet bloomed just right, with some crystal snowflakes falling on the branches, making it even more moving. Pei Zion helped her sit down on the wooden bench next to the corridor. He walked through the corridor and went to the green belt behind the medical building to pick some winter sweet flowers. Xiaoling watched his figure disappear into the plum forest through the glass, thinking to herself that God had really treated her well. Although there were always ups and downs of one kind or another, her beloved man was by her side after all, as well as their baby. She lowered her head, stroked her belly habitually, and said to herself, "Baby, you must be healthy and born well. Mom and Dad are looking forward to it." She sat in the corridor for a while with a peaceful smile. Suddenly, she saw the attending doctor hurriedly came over and said to her, "Ms. Xia, one of your test indicators is not very good and you need an injection." Xiaoling became worried and asked, "What indicator?" The attending doctor said, "The progesterone is not very stable, but it is not a big deal. Don't worry. As long as you cooperate with us to give the injection and go home and have a good rest, you will be fine." Xiaoling followed him to the injection room. On the way, she suddenly felt uncomfortable in her stomach, so she said to the attending doctor, "I'm going to the bathroom, and I'll be back right away." The attending doctor seemed a little reluctant, but still let her go. She was not hospitalized this time, so she entered the public bathroom in the hospital. As soon as she entered the cubicle and locked the door, she heard footsteps outside, which seemed to be 2 young nurses. One of them said, "Why are you giving Xiaoling medicine again? Isn't her fetus fine? Director Wang just said it was very healthy." Another young nurse lowered her voice, "Keep your voice down. Xiaoling is in the injection room getting an injection right now." "What kind of injection do you think it is?" "It's the anesthetic injection ordered by Mr. Pei. After the injection, she will undergo surgery." The little nurse at the beginning was shocked. What kind of surgery? You're stupid, of course it's an abortion, another young nurse said. Xiaoling stood in the cubicle, her breath froze. She couldn't believe her ears. What? Pei Xian actually wanted to perform an abortion on her. Her face turned pale, and even her body trembled. She controlled herself hard, being careful not to be heard by the two young nurses outside. I heard the two young nurses continue talking, and one asked, "Why? Mr. Pei really wanted this child before, didn't he try every possible means to keep it?" Another said, "Who knows about the affairs of rich people? It's just a pain for Xiaoling. She originally wanted to have an abortion when she was 9 weeks pregnant. The harm was so small at that time. Just do a uterine suction surgery. What about now? The formed fetus must be cut into pieces and then taken out, and it may not be possible to clean it up in one go. This is a lot of suffering." The first nurse asked worriedly, "From what Dr. Wang said just now, it seems that this operation was hidden from Xiaoling herself. She was tricked into taking anesthesia first, and she will not know anything as soon as she faints. When the time comes, when you wake up after the operation, it will be too late to cry or make trouble. But, in this case, isn't our hospital violating the wishes of the patient? Are you afraid of being responsible?" Another nurse sneered. "Don't worry, if the sky falls, there will be tall people holding it up. Mr. Pei is rich and powerful, how can he make Xiaoling cause trouble? Besides, I heard it is said that the old man of the Pei family has never liked Xiaoling. When Mr. Pei makes any excuse and blames the whole thing on him, she can make trouble and the world will soon be at peace." Xiaoling's heart grew colder the more she heard this. She didn't expect that man's thoughts were so vicious, and he would quietly murder her child. Not only that, he also put on a hypocritical and gentle face in front of her, so that even if the child died, she wouldn't be able to blame him, and she might even shed tears of gratitude for his gentle comfort. What a beast this is! There was no time to think too much. At this moment, Xiaoling only had one thought in her mind, and that was, "Save this child." With a bang, she pushed open the door of the cubicle and ran away under the panicked eyes of the two young nurses. She ran out desperately, bumping into someone along the way. She heard someone shouting from behind, "Miss Xia, aren't you going to get an injection? Come back quickly, don't fall, be careful of the child in your belly." She didn't dare to listen to their hypocritical concern. She knew that as soon as she stopped, she would be given an anesthesia injection. By then, no one would know what was going on and everything would be over. She ran to the exit of the corridor in one breath. People were coming and going in the hall on the first floor. Soon someone saw her and screamed, "Look! That's Xiaoling. This is the inconvenience of being a star, no matter where you go, people will pay attention to you." Xiaoling's face was pale and she was scurrying around in the crowd, but she was quickly surrounded by the excited crowd. "Stop squeezing! Stop squeezing!" She became frightened. She protected her lower abdomen with both hands and retreated to the wall not far away. She leaned her back against the wall and curled up as much as possible. "I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant. Where is the child?" End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1146. Chapter 1146, Desperate Guardian. The crowd was moving forward regardless, but when they heard her words, the eyes of the nearest people widened in disbelief. What? Is the big star Xiaoling pregnant? Before she could recover, she heard Xiaoling scream again, "If this child is crushed, who of you can afford to pay for it?" The people closest to her suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Yes, they are the children of Queen Xiaoling. Selling them would not be enough just for nutrition and mental damage, right? They don't want to go bankrupt chasing stars. So people hurriedly backed away, and a few kind-hearted people opened their arms to stop the surging crowd behind her, and loudly sent a message to her, "Everyone, please stop crowding. Miss Xiaoling is pregnant. Don't cause trouble." What? Xiaoling is pregnant? Isn't she not married yet? The shocking news spread throughout the hall at an extremely fast speed, like a drop of cold water exploding on boiling oil. Many people asked, is it true or false? Who is the father of the child? Miss Xia, who is the father of the child? Who is so irresponsible? Ms. Are you acting as a third party for others? A middle-aged aunt's voice said, "Thankfully my daughter still likes you so much and treats you as an idol, but you got pregnant out of wedlock. Isn't this bad teaching for children?" All kinds of discussions turned into a pot of porridge. Xiaoling felt her head buzzing, and she felt dizzy in waves, almost losing her balance on her feet. She took a deep breath and managed to calm herself. She raised her eyes and saw a tall figure walking in hurriedly from the other side of the hall door. However, seeing the bustling scene, the man stopped again and changed imperceptibly. The direction retreated into the shadow of the corridor not far away. She saw Pei Zian turn his head and give some instructions to the medical staff on the side. The medical staff Pei Zian struggled to push through the crowd and maintain order, shouting loudly, spread out, why are you crowding here? Don't affect other people's medical treatment." She suddenly understood why Pei Zian hid in the shadows. There were too many people here, and he didn't want others to find out that he was the child's biological father. Blood rushed to his head in waves. At that moment, all reason and thinking were thrown away. Xiaoling stretched out her hand, pointed in the direction where Pei Zian was standing, and said fiercely, "That's him. He is the biological father of the child. Pei Zian." Everyone turned their heads and saw the tall, silent man in the shadows. "It's him, it's actually him. The Emperor's chairman Pei Zian." For a moment, the crowd was excited again, and all kinds of voices could be heard. "Mr. Pei, is this child really yours? What is your relationship with Miss Xiaoling? Is this considered adultery? Bah, shameless. You are bringing my daughter down." The noise filled the sky. Pei Zian originally wanted to avoid it, but he couldn't. His eyes met hers across half the hall, as if they had traveled through thousands of years. Xiaoling still pointed at her and said tremblingly, "Pei Zian, you are so cruel." Pei Zian looked at her calmly. She looked pale and had disheveled hair, like a cornered little animal that had no choice but to open its still immature fangs and bite people. He actually felt distressed. He walked slowly out of the shadows and walked towards her. Medical staff and security guards hurried forward and pulled out an isolation belt for him to prevent other people from rushing into this distinguished man. The crowd parted like a tide, and he walked up to her step by step, reaching out and pressing the hand she pointed at him. "Sorry," he said, "I didn't get the plum blossoms for you." Xiaoling thought of the winter sweet blooming in the snow, and what he said earlier. To celebrate. She once asked him what he was celebrating. It turned out that it was to celebrate her upcoming abortion. "Tiger poison can't even eat its seeds," she said tremblingly, "you are worse than an animal." The crowd was in commotion again. What did Xiaoling mean by this? What's the secret? The gossip crowd pricked up their ears to listen. Only Pei Zian understood what she was talking about. He was not going to pick plum blossoms. He walked around the green belt and immediately called the attending doctor and told him to act according to the predetermined plan. That's why the attending doctor found Xiaoling and told her which injection she needed. Unexpectedly, the matter was revealed. I don't know if the girl was lucky or not. She managed to escape to the hall and revealed the identity of the child's biological father in one sentence, which made things a bit tricky. Pei Xian was rapidly thinking about the possible development direction of the matter in his mind. If he did not acknowledge the child, she would probably become angry and embarrass her and reveal everything. She has always had this careless temperament since she was a child, willing to risk anything and fight to the death. But if he admits it, things will be difficult to handle. Not to mention that the future marriage will become full of twists and turns, but right now, Mr. Pei Zhenyuan will definitely be furious, and there will definitely be a big turmoil within the Pei family, followed by a purge of the entire emperor. The forces within the emperor were deeply intertwined. Over the years, he had worked hard to maintain just the right balance, but he was not fully prepared for a large-scale, all-round conflict. Although her thoughts were changing, her expression remained calm and she said to her, "Don't lose your temper. You are so old and you are still so ignorant." She heard the threat in his words and flinched. However, this was the only chance to keep the child alive, and she had to fight to the death no matter what. Xiaoling said loudly to the crowd around her, "The doctor said it's a baby boy. He's very healthy. He will be born safely. If there is anything wrong, it must be an accident and it means murder." There is so much information hidden in her words that people have to think about it. Some experienced women have thought, can they tell the gender of their child? It has been at least 4 months. Counting the time, isn't it exactly the time when Pei Xian and the eldest lady of the Wang family got engaged, and then the eldest lady passed away? It's simply too scary. "Mr. Pei," someone couldn't help but raised his voice and asked, "While you are engaged to Miss Wang Jingguan, you also got Miss Yaling pregnant." This question caused the frying pan to explode again. Who is the winner of the shocking love triangle among wealthy families? Who is the third party? People were so excited that some people had already taken out their mobile phones and clicked various shutter flashes to capture the expressions of Xiaoling and Pei Xian in every detail. Pei Xian had not yet thought about how to end this farce, and he knew that the best response at this moment was not to respond. Therefore, he ignored the crowd and only said to Xiaoling, "Go back with me." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1147. Chapter 1147. Put down the scissors. Xiaoling desperately shrank her body back. "I won't. I will abort the child in my life." "Pei Xian, how can you be so cruel? I finally decided to give birth to him." She raised her palm-sized little. She looked at him with a pitiful face and choked up sobs as she spoke. "When I said I wanted to abort him, you refused to agree. Now I have fallen in love with him and can't let go. How can you bear to send him to death again?" In front of the crowd, Pei Xian only said in a low voice, "Abortion? Did you misunderstand something? The doctor is just helping you protect your fetus. You caught a cold in Zaqui Lake a few days ago, so you need to take good care of yourself." Xiaoling laughed angrily. "Pei Xian, if I hadn't seen through your conspiracy, the child would have been aborted by now." Her heart felt like it was trampled on the ground and shattered into pieces. It turned out that he had tried every possible means to. She was asked to preserve the pregnancy, but the gender of the child had not yet been confirmed. If I had known it was a boy, I would have been aborted at 9 weeks. Whether she wants it or not. He may love her, but he loves his family and power more, and she is just a small in his grand hegemony, a victim, nothing more." Her tears fell slowly. Pei Xian said to Xiaoling very gently, "You are pregnant now and your mood is unstable. Don't be suspicious all the time. This will not be good for the fetus. Come back with me and I guarantee that the child will be safe." Xiaoling looked at him with a sneer. "Do you think I will still believe you? I'm afraid if she follows him back, she will be sent to the operating table." Although she was stupid, she had suffered so many losses from him and she had become more or less obedient. Pei Xian frowned and said, "Then what do you want?" There were more and more people watching. He didn't want to continue to be treated like a monkey here. More importantly, he wanted to end this farce while the situation was still under control. Xiaoling looked at him seriously. You swear, you will ensure the safety of our baby? If the baby is short or long, do you believe that I will die with him? Pei Xian's face darkened. Don't be fooling around. Xiaoling smiled desperately. You don't dare to swear, right? She said, looking around the crowd sadly. I don't know how many of you are my fans. If you like me, please help me. Get out of here. Because my child's safety is not guaranteed around him. Such a beautiful girl asked for help with tears in her eyes, and many people were moved with sympathy. They were eager to help her escape from here. But Pei Xian was always one step ahead and said coldly to the crowd, you can give it a try. This is gathering a crowd to make trouble, and you have to pay a price. He has always been a good at intimidating people, with a pair of cold eyes. I glanced over and saw how many people were trembling and silent. When everyone stopped talking, he looked at Xiaoling again and said, follow me. It was then that Xiaoling realized how vulnerable the popularity and appeal she had always been proud of was. In the face of power, no one could count on but herself. She looked at him fearfully and shook her head. Pei Xian said, do you want to go by yourself, or should I carry you? He is not only tall, but also very strong. It is always easy to pick her up. She quickly saw the situation clearly, turned pale, and said softly, I'll go by myself. He smiled with satisfaction and led her step by step out of the crowd and back to the obstetrics and gynecology clinic. There are many medical staff standing in the clinic, which is solemn and silent. The pale white walls and the pungent smell of disinfectant are almost suffocating. The attending doctor asked cautiously, Mr. Pei, should the operation continue? Before Pei Xian could say anything, Xiaoling suddenly grabbed a pair of scissors on the table and pointed it at her neck. I want this child to live, she said, and if you lay a finger on him, I won't live either. The scissors pierced her fair skin bit by bit, and bright red blood flowed down. The doctors and nurses all exclaimed, Ms. Xia, calm down. Put down the scissors first. Xiaoling turned a deaf ear to the sounds around her and just looked at Pei Xian. The two faced each other silently for 1,000 seconds. Finally, Xiaoling couldn't hold it any longer and said to Pei Xian in a trembling voice, just treat me as pitiful. If the child is gone, I will really die. Xiao has disappeared. He is my only lover. Without him I can't survive. Zi Hung, please. Pei Xian remained silent, as if he was weighing the truth of her words. It was the doctor who became anxious first and said to Xiaoling, Ms. Xia, please stay calm and stop talking. Be careful of puncturing the main artery in the neck. It's really hopeless. Xiaoling burst into tears. Do I still care whether I can be saved or not? If the child must die, then let me die before him. Don't let me watch him disappear. Her voice is so plaintive that the listeners are moved and almost cry. Pei Xian finally spoke, put down the scissors. Xiaoling looked at him distrustfully, if you don't agree to let me give birth to him, I won't put down the scissors. As he spoke, the wound on his neck became deeper and deeper, and the blood flowed faster. What started as a meander turned into a gurgling stream, which was shocking. Pei Xian also spoke faster, okay, I promise you. Xiaoling asked in a trembling voice, really? Pei Xian said, I can swear. Xiaoling confirmed to him, if the child dies, I will really die, and, I will crush my bones and spread them to ashes, so that you can't even find the ashes, and you will never be able to be buried with me. Pei Xian frowned and said coldly, put down the scissors. You are committing suicide. You don't have to wait until I kill the child. You will kill yourself and him. Xiaoling then felt the burning pain in her neck and put down the scissors. The doctor quickly stepped forward to bandage her wound, and after struggling for a while, Pei Xian took her home with her, paving the way for the bodyguards who came after hearing the news. Hongqiang Villa is as quiet and beautiful as ever. Zhou's mother came up to her and looked at the white gauze wrapped around Xiaoling's neck and shoulders. She was startled and asked, "Miss, what's wrong with you?" Xiaoling was not in the mood to talk and slowly entered the room. Pei Xian, who was behind him, didn't look very good. He told Zhou's mother, "Watch her carefully. If you need anything, come to me in the study." Zhou Ma saw that the atmosphere was not right, so she responded submissively and did not dare to say anything more. Xiaoling was extremely tired and lay down on the bed for a long sleep. In a long dream, she dreamed that Pei Xian had aborted the child. She looked everywhere, but only found a large piece of flesh, and she woke up crying. The long night is quiet, and the stars are shining brightly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Xiaoling saw a tall figure sitting on the bedside. Even though the light was not turned on, she could still recognize that it was Pei Xian, the man she loved and hated. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1148. Chapter 1148, Opening of Ancestral Hall. She looked at him with some caution, said nothing, and did not dare to move. Pei Xian's deep voice was particularly magnetic in the night. "What, I am a tiger and can eat people." Xiaoling said, "You are more terrifying than a tiger." Pei Xian remembered her remarks about tiger poison not eating its seeds, and sneered, and said, "Are you satisfied now? The whole world knows that you are pregnant with my child." He spent the whole afternoon in the study thinking about this matter. How to deal with the aftermath. His phone was about to explode, and Pei Zhenyuan roared at him to go back to his ancestral home and give an explanation to the entire clan. Even Secretary Xia and Chu Chen are very concerned about the progress of the situation, and they are all fighting. As a person involved, it's good that she still has the heart to sleep here. Pei Xian looked at her wrapped up in a quilt and said solemnly, "Sometimes I really want to strangle you to death." "Then just strangle me to death," Xiaoling said slowly. The two of them were silent for a while, and then Pei Xian's voice came from the darkness, "Xiaoling, don't think that I can't bear it." She felt a pain in her heart, but she pretended not to care. "Oh? Are you willing to do it?" Her love had been broken long ago, leaving only riddled with holes. If it weren't for the sake of her children, maybe she would really end her own life. She looked at the man in front of her, what a man she loved so deeply. But, what can we do if we love deeply? There are too many people and things in this world who are more powerful than her, and her attempt to change her destiny is like trying to use a mantis arm to fight a chariot. Pei Xian said, "Don't show your face these days. Let Chu Chen and I handle the outside affairs." She was the one who had caused such a big disaster and still needed his careful care. If it had been anyone else, she might have died 100,000 times. As long as Xiaoling doesn't abort the child, everything will be fine, so she has no objection. But after all, I was still concerned about the progress of the situation, so I asked, "How do you plan to deal with this matter?" Pei Xian looked at her solemnly, and the look in his eyes made her heart tremble. Suddenly, he said, "Is this the result you want? I have already agreed with the Wang family that I will tell all the media that my engagement with Wang Jingguan was just an accident. It was the fortune teller who said that Wang Jingguan was destined to have a life-or-death event. Tribulation must lead to happiness, and I am the person who matches the horoscope, so the Wang family approached me. Miss Wang Jingguan doesn't love me, and I don't love her either. Our relationship is just friendship and support. We originally planned to terminate our engagement soon after the wedding. But I didn't expect that Miss Wang still couldn't get through that. A life-or-death calamity. In this way, those outside discussions about me being in two different situations, or who is the third party between you and Wang Jingguan, will be put to rest, which will be good for the three of us." In addition, I will also tell the media that you and I really love each other, but I have been unable to marry you because of the wedding. In addition, Wang Jingguan is newly mourned. Even if it is out of politeness, I will not hold the wedding at this time. If it's appropriate, I can only let you give birth to the child first and make plans later. This is the best result he can achieve by mediating between various forces. As for other things, we will do it step by step from now on. Xiaoling also knew that it was not easy to get such a result, and it could even be said to be an unexpected surprise. She never expected that her identity would be exposed to the sun after the desperate situation, letting everyone know that she was Pei Xian's serious lover. Sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy came to my heart together, a mixture of 5 flavors. Pei Xian looked at her and said, "One more thing. You will be removed from the Pei family's genealogy to avoid being scolded as a. In a few days, prepare to go back to the ancestral hall with me." Xiaoling was stunned for a moment, suddenly feeling lost. Being removed from the family tree? More than 10 years ago, she was adopted by him so happily, looking forward to spending the rest of her life under his gentle care. But what about now? She was only in her 20s, and she was only halfway through her life before she was about to be expelled and kicked out of the house in embarrassment. Yes, get out the door. It was her shameless desire to give birth to this child that pushed the whole thing forward, not his desire. From now on, she will no longer be part of the Pei family, she will no longer be the daughter of the Pei family, and she will never be the daughter-in-law of the Pei family. Even whether her son can join the ancestral home is a matter of debate. But, even if it was so difficult, she still couldn't give up the child in her belly. That is her and his baby, a lifetime treasure. Pei Xian took off his clothes and went to bed. He took her into his arms from behind and said, "Go to sleep." Her back was pressed against his chest, feeling his body temperature and heartbeat, and she had the illusion of being loved. She raised her head and looked out the window at the starry sky, her mood fluctuating with the starlight. Behind him, his deep voice suddenly came, "I'm sorry, I only have so much love, but I will give it all to you." Her mind was shaken and she said nothing. Pei Xian didn't speak anymore, and the surroundings fell into silence again. The Wang family cooperated with the emperor to publish a public relations release and held a media conference. They unified the tone and issued a happy statement. The Wang family can only do this, otherwise Pei Xian will definitely come up with something to make them more embarrassed and ruin Wang Jingguan's reputation. With the joint help of all parties, the story of Pei Xian and Xiaoling was portrayed as a romantic love, which fascinated countless people and wished them an early success. Pei Zhenyuan was so angry that he threw the newspaper on the table with a slap and cursed, "What a perfect match, a match made in heaven, it's all nonsense. I think it's just a rooster and a dog robber, working together." Pei Jingyu patted him on the back to cheer him up, "Grandpa, things have come to this point, so don't make it too embarrassing. From now on, you will have to rely on your eldest cousin in the family." Pei Zhenyuan even scolded her, "Didn't you just go to Zaqui Lake? Why did you turn your elbows outward? If you do it the other way around, everything will go the other way." Pei Jingyu just smiled and said nothing. Pei Zhenyuan slapped the table, "On the day when the ancestral hall is opened, I must make her look good." The day came soon. Accompanied by Pei Xian, Xiaoling wore a loose light blue dress and slowly walked into the ancestral hall from the door. Now she is almost 5 months pregnant, and her belly is already visible, but her face is still very beautiful. Anyone who looks at her will praise her as a beauty, and even many members of the Pei clan cannot take their eyes away. She stood still under the ancestral tablet, feeling the substantial gazes coming from all directions, and her back straightened. Now that she has come to this step, she will not be afraid of such a scene. No matter whether these Pei family members look down on her, no matter what, they can't change any decision she makes. The child is destined to be born. The person in charge of presiding over the ceremony was a highly respected old man in the clan. Before officially crossing off Xiaoling's name, he had to read out her sins in front of the entire clan, and then listen to the old man explain them one by one. Thinking about it, they are all vicious words about people who do not keep their duty, are shameless, and are ungrateful. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1149. Chapter 1149, Wrong Person. Pei Xian's face became grim on the spot, but he did not get angry immediately. Xiaoling said nothing and listened quietly with a sarcastic smile. She wanted to see how they could humiliate her. I was afraid that even if she wanted to give birth to the child, they would be unable to do anything, so she was jumping on her feet and getting angry. The old man who read out her crime went on for at least 10 minutes with a long speech, and still showed no intention of stopping. Although Xiaoling was not afraid of being scolded, she was pregnant after all and worried that the baby in her belly would not be able to hold on. She unconsciously glanced in the direction of Pei Xian, vaguely asking for help. Pei Xian was dissatisfied that she wanted to keep the child at all costs, but that was a private matter between the two of them, and it was not the turn of outsiders to look at her. He coldly interrupted the old man who read out her crime. That's enough. The old man was reading vigorously when he was suddenly interrupted and was very dissatisfied. He looked at him solemnly and said, "No noise is allowed in front of the ancestral tablet." Pei Xian, even if you are the patriarch, don't you know this rule? Pei Xian said, "The person you taught me was very happy." The tone is cold, like a sign of an angry beast. Even though the old man was used to seeing all kinds of big scenes, he couldn't help but feel a little frightened when facing this young and majestic patriarch, and he kept silent for a while. The Pei family members present looked at each other. Some were worried about how it would end, but there were also some who were enjoying the show. Pei Xian strode forward, took the ink pen amidst everyone's exclamations, and crossed out Xiaoling's name on the genealogy with just one stroke. She was adopted, and her name was written small, right next to his, like a pair of birds that were dependent on each other. When he crossed it out, his heart stung slightly, but he soon regained his composure. After finishing writing, he sneered, put away the pen, took Xiaoling's hand and walked out. Xiaoling was held by him and felt that his big dry hands were so steady and strong, as if he would never let go of her. As he walked out of the ancestral hall, the coldness that followed him disappeared, and his eyes were filled with bright sunshine. Behind him, Page Yuan's angry yelling could be heard vaguely. He originally had people prepare a speech of admonishment for an hour, but he was interrupted by Pei Xian after only 10 minutes of speaking. Where does this put his face? What worries him even more is that Pei Xian is getting more and more out of control. He disregards the instructions of his ancestors and is arrogant, and dares to disturb the ancestral hall. Moreover, even if he did this, there was nothing the whole clan could do against him. The entire emperor is becoming more and more like Pei Xian's one-spoken voice. Maybe it won't be long before there will be no room for other voices. This made Pei Zhenyuan feel horrified. Pei Zhenyuan was the most important person in charge of taking over as the chairman of the board. He had always felt that Pei Xian was just a junior. Even if he was a bit promising, he was far from being able to speak for himself. But now, reality gave him a hard slap, and Pei Zhenyuan was completely shaken. I woke up from the hallucination and realized that the family was about to change. He would never allow things to develop like this. Preventing Xiaoling from giving birth to a child was not only for the sake of the entire Pei family, but also a struggle of will between him, the lonely and important minister, and Pei Xian. He summoned his closest subordinates and whispered a few instructions. The subordinates took the order and left. Pei Xian took Xiaoling's hand and walked through the grassy path. This generation of buildings is the Pei families, scattered in heights, quaint and quiet. Across a dual carriageway, listening to their Rolls-Royce, Pei Xian said to Xiaoling softly, "Keep on holding on, and you can rest when you get home." While talking, he walked with her across the road. Suddenly, a sports car rushed out from the front and rushed towards Xiaoling with lightning speed. Xiaoling's eyes widened in horror and she wanted to hide, but her feet seemed to have roots and she couldn't move even half a step. Her mind went blank and she thought she was going to die here. Suddenly, her body was pushed away hard, followed by a muffled sound of a heavy object hitting, a harsh sound of brakes, and the car reversed. Then, the sports car accelerated and hit her again. She was standing under a tree, scared out of her wits. Fortunately, she knew she was moving this time, so she ran towards the green belt with her hands and feet on the ground. As for the sports car, after hitting several trees in a row, it finally found that it couldn't drive in, so it had no choice but to give up and turn around and drive away. Xiaoling was still in shock, and then she saw Pei Xian lying on the ground quietly on the other side of the road, with a pool of blood flowing out from under him, which was shocking. Her heartbeat almost froze, and she shouted heartbreakingly, "Zi Hung!" Staggeringly ran towards him, squatted down, and checked his injuries. He was seriously injured, his face was as thin as gold paper, his eyes were closed tightly, and he had lost consciousness. The driver of the Rolls-Royce also got out, shaking his hands and calling someone. Not long after, Pei's family came over with a stretcher, and they helped him get into the car and take him to the hospital. The emergency doctor saw his appearance and quickly arranged for surgery. The door of the operating room was closed and the red light turned on, blocking Xiaoling and her group of worried people from outside. She looked at the closed door and had never been so panicked. Even when she was worried that Xiaoyu would not survive for a few years in the orphanage, she had never been so panicked. Since she met Pei Xian, she has never thought about what it would be like to lose him one day. Even if they quarrel or break up, he will still live well in this world, allowing her to think about him through various means whenever she misses him. Ways to see. But this time, maybe heaven and man will be separated forever. She was not mentally prepared at all for the distance between heaven and earth. Xiaoling looked sad, clasping her fingers on her chest and praying silently. Suddenly she heard someone scolding her. "Bitch! Broom star! Do you still have the nerve to wait here? If it weren't for you, how could something happen to Zi Hung?" She turned her head and saw Pei Zhenyuan, who had rushed over after hearing the news. Although Mr. Pei Zhenyuan is dissatisfied with Pei Xian's various styles, he is his own nephew after all, so how can he have an overnight feud? When he heard that the driver he sent to hit Xiaoling actually hit Pei Xian, his head was about to explode. If Pei Xian had some shortcomings, how should he explain to his dead brother and nephew? Xiaoling has always been sharp-tongued, but this time she was scolded by Pei Zhenyuan into silence. Her heart was filled with self-blame. Yes, if it weren't for herself, how could something happen to Zi Hung? The car was clearly coming towards her. If Zi Hung hadn't pushed her to save her, he wouldn't have been hit at all. The person lying in the operating room now should be her. Although she didn't speak, Chu Chen couldn't stand it anymore. He came here to see the boss, but he also came to accompany Xiaoling. When the boss is away, of course his women and children must be protected by loyal subordinates. He didn't care whether it was the Pei family or not. He took a step forward, protected Xiaoling behind him, and said to Pei Zhenyuan in a neither humble nor condescending manner, "Old man, what you said is wrong." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 1150. Chapter 1150. Let's get married. Pei Zhenyuan looked at him angrily. Chu Chen said, "Why are there cars running rampant on the Pei family's property? Could it be that someone dislikes Xiaoling and the child in her belly and deliberately murdered her? Instead of going to find the murderer, go to the door of the operating room instead. What's the point of making a noise and accusing Xiaoling of unfounded charges?" Pei Zhenyuan certainly knew that this was a deliberate murder, but he just hit the wrong person. He warned Chu Chen coldly, "Watch your mouth, it's not your turn to interrupt what the Pei family is talking about." Not to be outdone, Chu Chen said, "Sorry, I heard that Xiaoling has just been removed from the family tree and is no longer a member of the Pei family. What qualifications do you have to reprimand her as an elder of the Pei family?" Pei Zhenyuan was so angry that his lungs were about to burst and he glared at him. Without even looking at him, Chu Chen helped Xiaoling sit down on the bench in the corridor and comforted her softly, "Don't worry, boss, she is blessed with great fortune and everything will be fine." Xiaoling hoped that he would be safe and sound. However, the scene of the accident came over and over again in her mind, and she could not get rid of it bloody. She originally thought that he was selfish and cruel, willing to risk everything for his own ambition. However, after experiencing this incident, she realized that he could risk his life for her. Unexpectedly, I remembered what he said that night again. "I'm sorry, I only have this little love, but I gave it all to you." Suddenly she forgave him. Nothing is unforgivable anymore, including his marriage, his self-righteous difficulties, and his past dirty tricks and intrigues. Life is so short, what else can you do if you can meet someone who is willing to die for you? If you are too greedy, you will be struck by lightning. She let out a long breath. At worst, as he said, they would be buried together in the end if they were born in different quilts and died in the same cave. When I think about it this way, I feel that this life is not so painful. The lights in the operating room stay on for a long time. Pei Zhenyuan was old and couldn't hold on anymore. She was advised to rest, but she still waited stubbornly. When she felt sleepy, she would lie down on the bench with her clothes on. Chu Chen had no choice but to find a thick blanket and quilt for her. A superstar as big as her, huddled on the bench, looked like those embarrassed and miserable family members of patients. She didn't care. Chu Chen advised her, "I booked a hotel for you opposite the hospital. You can go there to rest. Even if you don't think about yourself, you should think about the child in your belly." She lowered her head, caressed her belly softly, and said after a moment, "I won't leave, Zi Hong needs me." Even if the baby knows, he will understand his parents. Their baby is so strong, and has gone through several times. All the conspiracies and accidents were safe, and she believed that he would be born safely. "Baby," she said softly, looking at her slightly bulging belly, "bless daddy." The door to the operating room opened, and a tired-looking doctor came out. Xiaoling ignored the blanket slipping off her body and hurriedly rushed forward, "Doctor, how is Zi Hung?" The doctor took off his mask and said, "Fortunately, the patient was delivered in time. The patient's condition has stabilized. The damaged internal organs have been sutured and the broken bones have been repaired. As long as he takes good care of himself, there will be no sequelae." She felt relieved after hearing these words. Her body softened, and she almost fainted from the fatigue of the past few days. Chu Chen quickly supported her and said, "Let's go to the hotel suite." She stopped him, "No, put me in his ward. I will guard him." At this time, several medical staff pushed Pei Ziyan out. Xiaoling was about to push forward to see him, but a young nurse stopped her and said politely, "Sorry, Miss Xia, please stay away from the patient to prevent infection. We are now sending him to the sterile special care unit for 3 days. He will be transferred to the general ward later." Xiaoling stopped in disappointment and watched the medical staff push him into the elevator. Turning around, he said to Chu Chen, "Where is the sterile ward? Then I will go and guard outside the sterile ward." Chu Chen seriously thought about whether it would be illegal to knock her unconscious. Finally, he sighed, cleared up the ordinary family members outside the sterile ward, and placed her alone in the corridor. She stood guard in the corridor, looking in through the one-way glass when she was awake. Sometimes she could see half of his profile, sometimes she couldn't see anything, but she always felt satisfied when she was closer to him. When he was tired, he would sleep with his clothes on the camp bed prepared by Chu Chen. 3 days passed longer than expected. When he was finally pushed out, he was still unconscious and his eyes were tightly closed. She asked the doctor worriedly, "How is he? Is he going to be okay?" The doctor said, "Don't worry, Miss Xia, the patient's physical signs are very stable and he will wake up soon." She breathed a long sigh of relief, trotted along the hospital bed with pulleys, and reached out to hold his hand. "Zion, you have to hold on," she cheered him up, "I'm right here." Enter the VIP single room. 3 days later, Pei Zion woke up and the first thing he saw was Xiaoling standing by the bed. His body was still very weak, but his words were clear, and he said in a low and hoarse voice, "I heard your voice in my dream." One sentence made her cry. She suddenly became angry and cried and scolded him, "Why are you so stupid? Why did you risk your life to save me? If you die, what's the point of me surviving? I will definitely go with you, go to hell." She sobbed, getting more and more sad the more she cried. There was a faint smile in Pei Zion's eyes. "Stop crying, you'll cry like a little cat." "You take care of me," she cried. Pei Zion said weakly, "You are still pregnant with our child." Xiaoling was stunned for a moment, then raised her head to look at him, with tears still in her eyes. "Didn't you never want me to give birth to this child? Why do you suddenly care about him?" "I regret it," he said. She didn't quite understand what he meant and still looked at him stupidly. He smiled weakly again and whispered, "I regretted it when that car hit you at that moment." He had no time to react. His instinctive thought was to protect her and the child, and he would rather be broken into pieces. What family, what power? These may be important, but none of them are the most important. Only their mother and son are his whole world. Her crying gradually became lower, but the tears flowed more fiercely. Little by little, she half knelt down beside his hospital bed and gently leaned her little head on the edge of his bed. He reached out his hand, stroked her soft hair, and suddenly said, "Get married." She was so shocked that she didn't know how to react. She raised her head and looked at him with her mouth open. End of this chapter.